Welcome to the Amash Files, your one-stop podcast for Justin Amash's march to the presidency, featuring deep dives into who Justin Amash is, campaign analysis from experts, and news from the campaign trail. If you're ready, let's get started. Well, hey, this is Eric. I'm here with Tyler.
Hello.
And we're delighted to have joining with us today Jen Monroe, who is known as Jen the Libertarian on the Jen the Libertarian podcast. Jen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, obviously, as Amash Files, we're interested in what's going on with Justin Amash and his entrance into the presidential race. So I wanted to get your feelings on what do you think his first week has been like, in either from a Libertarian Party perspective or just the Libertarian movement in general.
I mean, Amash running is something I've been cheerleading for a long time now, so obviously I'm pretty happy about it. I'm surprised, well, maybe not surprised, but at least happy that he is getting so much press. He seems to be doing like a lot of press, so I think that's really good. So far, I've really liked how he's appeared in media appearances. I know that's not everybody's opinion, but personally, I'm really happy about it. I'm stoked about it. Like I said, it's something I've wanted to see happen, so overall, I'm pretty happy.
What do you think? So within libertarian circles, obviously, everyone has their opinion of how you should be. Either super radical or tone it all the way back, or trying to appeal to the middle, trying to appeal to the left, trying to appeal to the right, or whatever, right? And so you can never make everyone happy, or in most libertarian circles, you can't make anybody happy. So how have you liked sort of his tone and sort of his messaging? And do you think it's sort of changed even from when he first announced, maybe till even today? We're now about like 8 or 9 days out as we're recording this.
Personally, I like it because I'm somebody who tends to be a little more pragmatic about this. I mean, I want a libertarian candidate that can appeal to a broader range of people outside of libertarianism, or even people who aren't libertarian and maybe this is their first time really being introduced to it or really thinking about it. Like, okay, there's this guy here and he seems fairly normal and sane. He's not 70 years old. He can form complete sentences. He seems to have some good ideas. So, hey, maybe this guy will be worth taking a look at.
Are you seeing a lot of pushback from people that you're in contact with in the movement about him being too pragmatic or not principled enough?
It's definitely polarizing, yes. There is definitely a split between people who are very happy about this and people who are kind of either pushing back because they don't like the idea of somebody who was a Republican coming back into the libertarian fold, or that he's just not libertarian enough or not libertarian in the way that they want him to be. So yeah, there's definitely a split within the party, and so I'm interested to see exactly how that's going to play out, especially once we get to whatever convention we have. That seems to be very up in the air right now, but yeah, it'll be, I definitely don't think it'll be like a unanimous thing. I think he will get the nomination eventually, but I don't think it'll be first ballot, and there will be pushback.
Yeah, and I think you'd expect there to be pushback. One thing that's interesting, you point out that there's sort of the two camps, we'll say the pragmatists and the philosophers, or the people who are the radicals in some sense. They want to have a very pure message, purists maybe we'll call them. Do you feel like if you were a purist, would you push quite so hard if you felt like you had a legitimate chance to win or to command such a presence in the election that you're sort of everywhere, and that you're pushing the message, even though it may not be that radical, libertarian message that some might want, but that you're like Ron Paul times 100, you're all over the place, and you're maybe finishing the election with 25%, let's say. Do you think the purists would be pushing that hard, or do you think it's because they feel like we're fighting for ballot X's or we're fighting for a message?
That is also a big split in the party. Personally, I am somebody who, my biggest goal out of an Amash run is I would like to get to 5%. Like, I mean, obviously I would like him to win, but I'm not completely crazy. I know that's probably not going to happen. But I know there's a lot of people within the movement who would like to see somebody more pure, even if that means that you don't get the attention and you don't maybe get to that 5% or even 3% or 2%. And for me, this isn't so much strictly an ideological project. I do want to see libertarian politics succeed. I do want to see libertarian politicians. I would like to see a libertarian president. So there's always that divide within the party between the people who kind of feel the way I do, like that more pragmatist, and people who kind of want to keep it more pure and don't seem to particularly care or mind if that doesn't translate into electoral success. So I'm not entirely sure, say, if there was like a purist candidate that could get 25%, which, I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron right there. You're not going to get that, which is why we have to have this conversation in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they would, but there is also kind of that dynamic within the party of wanting to keep it kind of smaller and more pure and maybe not have as many people in it, which I kind of don't get that thought process at all.
No, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I've thought for a long time that parties are meant to advance ideas. They're vehicles to get to where you want to go to. And obviously, the more people you have, and the better you are to get there. So if you look at least the past 2 presidential elections with a Libertarian Party candidate, possibly the past 3, it seems like a more pragmatic person has won out, Johnson in 12 and 16. Has that impacted sort of the purist, if we'll say, camp in the party? Is there more of a push for that in 2020 to really get someone that represents what they think the party should be looking like?
I think definitely within the party, especially since you did have Johnson in 12 and 16. And that's kind of amplified that feeling of, do we really want to have another ex-Republican be our candidate? Which, again, to me, it doesn't bother me, but it does bother other people. So I think that is kind of a big emerging narrative coming out of the party, too. So, again, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, honestly.
Well, one of the things I want to discuss today is their first presidential poll came out, the Monmouth polls. And it had Justin Amash polling at 5% nationally. I don't know how much these polls matter in some sense because we don't vote nationally, we vote by states. And so, of course, from an electoral standpoint, it matters more, where you're strong, where you're weak. But it kind of gives us a broad idea of where he is from a national ID standpoint, I suppose, where the Libertarian Party is. What are your initial thoughts with the 5% that came out a couple of days ago?
I don't hate it. I mean, it's not where Johnson was when he announced originally. I think he was at like 10% when he first announced. But that kind of fascinates me because I think that right now, because of everything that's happened to Amash in the past year / even if you want to narrow it down to like 6 to 9 months, I think he has a lot more name recognition nationally than Gary Johnson did. So I kind of take this polling as not entirely sure what to think about it because I do think he has more name recognition, but obviously he's not doing the same numbers. So I'm not quite sure how to interpret that yet.
I think there's something to the fact that just for the past 2 or 3 months, news cycles have been very dominated by one particular issue, the pandemic of COVID-19 and the various responses to that. I kind of feel like a lot of political noise is getting drowned out, like they're canceling primaries and stuff. Politics is not really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I wonder how much that has impact on who's thinking about this, name ID penetration and such.
Yeah, there's that too. And it also feels like impeachment was like 3 years ago when really it was like 3 months ago. It just, time has no meaning anymore.
Mm-hmm. The difference between Johnson and Amash entering the race, Johnson, when he went to the race, I don't know how much you may remember it because it does seem like about 300 years ago in 2012. But he came in right after leaving the Republican primary. I mean, he was on the debate stage with the Republican candidates for at least a couple debates because I know he was debating Ron Paul. And so I think he naturally came in with a higher ID just because of that, right? And I would suspect Justin's name ID is still relatively low unless you're a hardcore Politico junkie and you're paying lots of attention during, the impeachment time or, its Declaration of Independence. When you looked at the polling information as far as demographics, did anything jump out at you that you found sort of interesting or surprising?
Well, the age range is rather interesting. It does seem like he is getting support from younger people, which pleases me greatly. I would like to see more younger people come into the fold. And I think the reason for that might be that, I mean, you look at the other 2 candidates, and it's like you have Trump, you have Biden. I mean, look at them. Just look at them. And so I think that contrary to what a lot of people think that like now is not the quote unquote right time for Amash, I think now is actually a fairly good time, or at least as good as any other, because you do have this incredibly weak field of just very old, tired men that nobody really likes, honestly. I mean, I don't know how many, I mean, I'm sure there are people that really do like Trump and people who really do like Biden, but it seems like it's more voting for your tribe or voting against the other tribe. And so I'm hoping maybe not just young people, but really just everybody in the middle kind of gives Amash a chance, just because, like, he's something different. He's something new. He's something fresh. He's not old. He doesn't have sexual assault allegations. Like, he's a fairly, he's like we have a functioning adult. Like, you ask for any functioning adult 2020, well, here's a functioning adult. Like, here you go.
When I was looking at the numbers, what surprised me, I think, the most is not only the fact that he had almost 10% of people aged 18 to 34, was a split between men and women. If you look at the split between men and women, between Republicans and Democrats, you see pretty consistently the Democrats poll better with women and Republicans poll better with men. But with the
about a 10% split on this poll,
and yet with Amash, he pulls evenly from both men and women, which is surprising because you don't. You look around the Libertarian Party, Jen, you're kind of a rarity, right?
I'm a unicorn, yes. I think that part of that is, in just setting all jokes that I make aside about Amash and his personal appearance, I feel like his message is very gender neutral, and I've always been someone who's thought that the libertarian message in general is something that could be very appealing to women if you kind of, I don't want to say package it in the right way, because I'm not a fan of packaging ideology and messaging based on somebody's gender, but I think that if presented, perhaps would be a better word, in the right way, it would be appealing to women, because you are talking about a lot of things that I do think a lot of women talk about and think about, especially if you want to kind of put it in terms of thinking about, okay, what is your future going to be like for your children and your grandchildren? Like, do you want your children to have all this debt to pay back, and your grandchildren? Like, do you want your children to have a better life than what you have? Like, I think that it can be sold better than it is right now to women. And it's interesting that that split isn't happening with Amash support, that you are getting the same amount of women and men supporting him. So hopefully that's a trend that'll continue going forward too.
Do you find his messaging different than other libertarians like a Gary Johnson that you find more appealing? I mean, as a woman, or do you think he sort of somehow captures whatever it is that you're talking about?
See, this is something that I've thought a lot about, and this is a hard topic for me because it requires me to kind of move my brain in a way that it feels weird to make it move. But trying to understand how, well, I mean, honestly, like, it's a topic that obviously comes up if you're a woman or a libertarian, is why aren't there more women libertarians? And my answer is always, I don't know, this thought doesn't fit on my brain. And I've tried to make it fit, but I feel like, I don't know, and maybe there is something to it with the sort of physical packaging aspect of it. I'm trying not to sell Amash short here, but I'm not trying to say it's just that, but like, it's like I said, it's hard for me to parse because it's a message I already agree with. So trying to understand why somebody who may not already be in our camp is like drawn to him, it's kind of an interesting question. That's what I'm gonna have to think about a little more, honestly.
And I think demographically you're seeing a similar thing with, at least in the Monmouth poll, the differential between white, non-Hispanic, and then other races lumped together. Even split between both of those, whereas you see wide racial disparities in the polling for Democrats and Republicans versus that. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. It helps that he's the only non-white male currently in the polling data, I think. But I think there's something to the messaging, something to the package, as you're saying, that he's presenting, that I think is people responding to in non-traditional ways that we'd expect in a two-party system.
Yeah, and I mean, he does have that very compelling backstory where he is a non-white person, despite what Twitter may happen to think. But, I mean, he does. He has that great backstory. He's the son of a Palestinian and Syrian immigrants, and obviously he's come here. He's made something of his life. He's been in Congress for 5 terms now. Now he's running for president. So there is that nice backstory of, you know, child of immigrants, does good stuff, and is now running for president. It's kind of like I felt that same way about Andrew Yang in a way, where you have that nice backstory, like, okay, your parents came here from China, and then you've kind of worked your way up. Obviously, Yang has been a very successful businessman, and now he was running for president, and that's not happening anymore. But I do like those candidates with those kind of backstories, because it is something that people do kind of latch onto, especially people of color. It's nice to, like, look at somebody and see, like, somebody who looks more like you and looks more representative of you running for president. It makes some people feel good.
Yeah, and I think it's to your point. I think it's sort of aspiring in the sense that it sort of locks into our feelings of what we think America is, of opportunity and whether you're a big individualist or not, but certainly the thought that you can sort of make something of yourself, and everyone has the opportunity to do that. And for someone who exhibits that and shows the signs of a successful family, I think it's probably, it's very helpful. I also think, I wonder as far as the messaging go, if his demeanor is one that seems less threatening. I mean, you oftentimes hear psychologists talk about how women look at things where they look for safety is of a higher concern, a higher priority than it is for men. Men are more willing to go for risk. And so I wonder if you see that a little bit, and why maybe he seems more appealing to women than the average libertarian, because he doesn't quite seem so scary.
There might be something to that, too. I mean, he does have that very calm demeanor where, I mean, even on Twitter, even when he does his any kind of press hits or anything, he's willing to explain things out in a very calm, logical, kind of rational, not particularly emotional way, but just in a very easy to understand way of, this is what I think and this is why I think it. And it's not really an appeal to emotion, which everybody always makes that argument that, oh, if you want to get women into politics, if you want to get them to, like, support your candidate, you have to appeal to emotion. He really doesn't do that. And so that's why his success amongst women so far is rather interesting. And it kind of rebuts that whole idea that you can't approach women in that fashion and have them respond to you.
I guess we'll transition to the next week here. Where do you see him going in the next 2 weeks? We're assuming maybe 3 weeks till the convention, whenever it is. I mean, I assume it's going to be the end of May or the first week of June, hopefully, in order to give any of our presidential candidates a chance to be successful. What does he need to do to lock in the delegates at this point?
I mean, he has been very open about the fact that he knows he has work to do as far as that's concerned, that he does need to make delegates feel comfortable with him as a candidate so that they do vote for him. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming everybody that's listening to this podcast knows how the LP picks their nominee. It's not through primaries or anything. It's on the floor from delegate votes, so you have to win over delegates. So he's been very open about that. I mean, nationally, he's been doing a lot of press, which I think is really good. And I think he would be very receptive to anybody, delegate-wise, who has any kind of questions or anything, to engage with those people. And whether those people take him up on that is up to them. But I do think that he is leaving the door open to anybody who has any kind of questions or concerns about him as a candidate to approach him and address those concerns before the convention or even at the convention. Like I said, however we end up doing this, it's still very up in the air. I don't know if we're going someplace. Are we doing this at home? Who knows? But for his part, he has been very open about it. And I do think I think that goes a long way to reassuring people that at least he's there and willing to listen to any concerns.
Do you think that there's a lot of support ossified between either Hornberger or Gray or any other top runners who had been in before Justin declared?
I think definitely for Hornberger, which is why I would think this would be my prediction for the ticket that would go down the easiest, not necessarily the ticket everybody wants or thinks is their dream ticket, but an Amash Hornberger ticket, I think would go a long way to easing anybody's concerns that, oh, Justin Amash is just here because of ballot access or because he can't run as a Republican in Michigan for whatever reason they happen to think that, or that he's just kind of glomming onto the movement for whatever reason they happen to think it. I think that would be a good ticket. I know a lot of people have thrown Larry Sharp out there. I mean, that's a good pick too, but I think having Hornberger as VP would be probably the most palatable ticket as far as for LP people.
Is there an alternative ticket, maybe with Sharp, that you think would appeal to a broader, not just LP ticket of anyone in the field currently?
Possibly, especially since obviously you'd have a ton of diversity on that ticket, obviously. Larry Sharpe is very good at going out in public and pitching libertarianism to large groups of people, so it would be nice to have him on board to handle that. Not that I don't think Hornberger could do that too, but Larry Sharpe has been pretty demonstrably proven to be able to go out there and kind of make the pitch to people who aren't necessarily already libertarian. And I know he's got a lot of support within the party. I know there's a lot of people who like Larry Sharpe. There's a lot of people that supported him during his New York run. So either one of those tickets I think would be good, but I think as far as like soothing delegate concerns, I think Hornberger would be a better choice.
So as people who've been following the show and involved in libertarian politics recognize the vice presidential run is separate from the presidential run. So technically there's not a ticket that runs together. Judge Jim Gray is actually running with Larry Sharpe. So although they are running separately, so they are running as a ticket, but potentially, Larry Sharpe would be the only one running for vice president. I shouldn't say only one. I know there are others running, but he's certainly the most well-known of the candidates who are announced at this point. In the past, there have been, like with Gary Johnson, he brought Bill Weldon really at the last minute to run as a vice presidential candidate. Generally, delegations in these conventions will defer to their presidential candidate because there are considerations the presidential candidate has. They'll say, I need this person because of fundraising. I need this person for ideology. I need this person for this region of the country or something like that, although that's generally not as much a concern of the Libertarian Party. What do you think about these possibilities? Because these are the names I've heard floated out. There's Hampton, who is a former lieutenant governor, a Republican governor in Kentucky, who got bounced. She's a self-proclaimed libertarian. There's also Camille Foster, who is the co-host of it's kind of funny, but it's actually sort of semi seriously floated that Camille Foster could potentially be a vice presidential candidate. He's on the Fifth Column, and he was once I think he produced The Independents, and he was actually one of the co-hosts of that show as well. Do you lend any credence to those, or would those be things that would be palatable to the delegates, or is there anyone else out there that you can think of?
I mean, I will stand for Camille whenever possible. But whether that would really be helpful delegate-wise, I don't know, because I don't know how delegates would feel about Camille. I mean, I love Camille. I love Fifth Column. I mean, I'm friends with Matt. I love all those guys. So I would love to see an Amash Foster ticket. Whether that would accomplish the goal of making people more comfortable with Justin Amash, I don't know.
I guess the question broadly is not so much what happens to the LP once the nomination's done. In some ways, it doesn't matter. I guess you want to have members that are not angry to the point where they're revolting and working against you, because it's a fairly small base that you're starting with. But from a national appeal, I mean, is someone like Foster? I mean, is he someone who could really? Do you think he really could do a lot? I mean, he's also really radical. I mean, I almost in some ways I think the Hornberger people would like him.
Yeah, I mean, he is an anarchist. He is an ANCAP. So, and he can espouse that very well. Like, he's not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. He's well read. He's well spoken. He can pitch the message. Like I said, I don't know how delegates would feel about that, though, because he's not technically part of the party either, which you're probably going to come up on a lot of the same problems that Amash has, where people are kind of resentful of candidates who they feel are kind of interlopers. So that's why I think that whoever, I mean, and like you said, it's not really up to Amash who his VP pick is, but I think backing somebody who isn't seen as an interloper, somebody who has been in the movement for a long time, would go a long way towards kind of making people feel a little better, at least within the LP. And as far as the LP is concerned, I mean, when we have this convention, it's going to also be electing a new chair. It's going to be electing a new vice chair, because neither Sarwark or Merced is running for re-election. Everybody else, I think, is pretty much up for election too, but I don't know of anybody else who's bowed out. So the way the LP is going to look after this convention is going to be probably vastly different from what it looks like now. And so there's also that to contend with too, because it's going to probably go in a different direction. Which direction? Not entirely sure. But when you're obviously going to be losing your chair and your vice chair, things are going to be different, obviously.
If you had to pick any candidate to be a vice presidential candidate to go with Amash, who would you pick? And not worrying about the Libertarian Party at all. Who do you think, of the people who have been mentioned or we haven't talked about, Who do you think would be the best choice for him, who would give him the best, broadest appeal, maybe make the biggest impact to get on the debate stage to actually, really get the Libertarian Party's name out there?
Probably, as far as impact-wise, I'd probably have to go with Sharp if I wasn't going with Camille Foster. But probably, honestly, Larry Sharp. Nothing against Camille. I love Camille. But I think an Amash Sharp ticket would be fairly good, nationally speaking.
I mean, I've seen the name Mark Cuban floated too. I mean, I don't know how libertarian Mark Cuban is, or if he would be someone who'd be on the ticket. I have no idea even if he had any interest in that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if he does either, but again, you'd probably have that same sort of concern of people wondering why the hell is Mark Cuban here? Like, what? How did Mark Cuban get
Well, there's
here?
some interesting analogs, in Libertarian Party history. 1980 was Ed Clark and David Koch, and one of the reasons they wanted David Koch was for his self-funding capabilities to put money into the AD campaign. So there might be something to maybe not Mark Cuban, but maybe some libertarian of wealth who might be interested in that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Camille Foster's worth $100 billion. We don't know, or $100 million or something like that.
That I don't have any knowledge of, but like I said, it's going to be really interesting. I don't know what direction this is going to go in, and that's why I'm kind of bummed that Austin isn't happening, because I was really looking forward to it for a lot of different reasons. And I still plan on attempting to attend this convention, however it happens to take place. Last I heard, they're still trying to do this in a physical location. I don't even know, how you book a physical location right now. I don't know of anybody who's taking bookings, so... But if it happens virtually, I'll try to make that happen too. But, yeah, like I said, it's a lot is going to be very up in the air in this convention, and I'm not quite sure where, all the puzzle pieces are going to land.
Speaking as a layman / physician, I would say that the likelihood of any in-person convention any time within the election season before the fall is so incredibly unlikely that it would actually be even workable for most people. As far as the state's various lockdowns and the restriction of travel and quarantine, I can't imagine that it's something that could realistically be done. And anyone who thinks that is, I think, living in a fantasy world, personally. But that's my assumption. Finally, I guess when it comes to Amash with running the Libertarian Party, there's a natural constituency, I believe, within the Mises caucus, the hardline, the purists, because I think, Justin is he's very libertarian, maybe not exactly the same camp. He's not an ANCAP, but is it worth reaching out to that segment, or is that segment just so solidified that there's no ability to really peel off any votes for that delegates block?
I mean, it's always worth reaching out to every delegate that you possibly can. So I would suggest him doing it. Again, if you reach your hand out and somebody doesn't take it, then nobody can say that you didn't reach your hand out.
Sure.
It's another thing entirely to just completely reject people because you think they're going to reject you. I mean, at least give them that opportunity to reject you, and then you could say you tried. Within the Mises caucus, I don't know quite how much support Amash would have, but like I said, it's worth trying, and then you could say you tried.
Okay. Well, any parting thoughts, Jen?
Just that I'm really happy that Justin Amash finally entered the race, and obviously we all talk about this like it's like some shoo-in that he's going to get the nomination. I do think he's going to get the nomination. I don't think it's going to be first ballot, but I'm excited to have, even in 2020, where everybody is arguing whether now is the right time, but that's an argument we hear every 4 years. So, yep. I mean, if not now, when exactly? Mm-hmm. But I think now is a really good time to have somebody like Justin Amash running on the Libertarian ticket, just because he is kind of that very stark difference between the other two candidates. And I think that is going to be incredibly helpful in trying to break through, as far as not only just in the election, but as far as trying to kind of present libertarianism and the LP as something that is new and fresh and different, and also is not just the party of white dudes. Like, this is not a white dude. And even if you had like Larry Sharp or Camille Foster on the ticket, there's another not white dude. But just, I think now is honestly a good time for him to run. And I know a lot of people don't feel that way, but that's how I feel.
Well, great. Thanks so much for your insights. Well, hopefully this is just going to reignite a new liberty movement, just like there was with Ron Paul, except, maybe even bigger. So hopefully this is all part of it.
That's the hope.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Amash Files. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player and share it with your friends. We'd appreciate it if you left a written and 5-star review too. Send all questions and guest ideas to amashfiles@gmail.com.